I saw a dogman digging up a grave. Dear Scary Stories NYC, do you know that famous video that's been going around showing the dogman or werewolf digging up a grave in a cemetery in broad daylight? Well, my girlfriend and I saw virtually the same thing in a cemetery in Akron, Ohio, where we live. About the only differences between what happened to us and that video are that we were walking when we saw it, and in our case, that dogman stopped what he was doing and chased us out of the cemetery. Oh, another difference, I guess, is that it had become overcast and started to look like rain when we came upon the scene. So it really was like we walked into a scene from a horror movie. My girlfriend loves cemeteries and old things in general. She has a vintage hairstyle. She wears vintage clothing. She buys shoes made in vintage styles. She loves to visit cemeteries just to walk around old things. And Akron has a lot of cemeteries to choose from, believe me. So just a little while ago, we planned to spend one of our free days wandering around Chestnut Hill Memorial Park. It's a very beautiful cemetery located right across Sackett Avenue from the Bab Run Wildlife Sanctuary, which I'm 100% positive would inform you that they do not have dogman living inside if you were to ask them. Still, I'm not saying, I'm just saying. I mean, how many dogman sightings happen so close to wildlife preserves and natural areas? It makes you think. Or at least it makes me think. My girlfriend Jasmine's mom dropped us off at the cemetery, then went off shopping. She set a time with Jasmine to come pick us up, and we were on our own until then. Everything was fine, but then, as we walked into the cemetery, the skies turned dark. It was really weird, in fact. It sent a chill through me. I said something to her like, I bet if we walked back outside we'd see the sun again all over. And she told me to stop spooking her. That's another thing about my girlfriend. She doesn't like scary stuff, and she doesn't see graveyards as scary places. She sees them as romantic places. Romantic in the original sense, as in old-fashioned or visionary, like Byron and Shelley, the romantic poets. She thinks everything was better in the past, an idea I always laughed at her for before the year 2021. Now I think she's onto something. Chestnut Hill is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been, no doubt about that. Although there are a number of flat-to-the-ground tombstones out in the sun, it feels like the majority of them are older-fashioned and located in the shade under trees. There are so many trees. It almost feels in places like you're out walking in the forest, except that there happen to be these carved stones with names and dates on them. I'd even go so far as to say there can be sort of a fairy tale quality to a walk through that place, as though we were Hansel and Gretel, or possibly Little Red Riding Hood on the way to our unexpected encounter with the big bad wolf. I'll stop beating around the bush and get to the part you want to hear. It's just that every time I tell this part of the story, I feel a chill run through me, as though it were happening all over again. And I see the looks on people's faces when I talk about this. They can't feel even a small percentage of the fear we felt when this was happening. I keep struggling to find a way to communicate how scary, how frightening and upsetting this was that day, and I keep failing utterly each time. I've never been that scared, and I feel myself tensing up all over again just because it's so uncomfortable to have to talk about this part of the story. I never in my life felt so vulnerable. I wasn't just feeling weak in the face of the danger represented by that monster, but I was terrified that I wouldn't be able to defend Jasmine. I think that part was an even bigger fear than anything. I view myself as her protector, and she's an old-fashioned enough young woman that she tells me she likes that I feel that way. When I laid eyes on that monster, though, my heart sank, as I didn't know what I could do to defend either one of us if that thing decided to behave poorly toward us. So, here's what happened. We were strolling under the trees, listening to the thunder off in the distance seem to grow a little bit closer with every blast. We were debating how far away the rain was and discussing what we should do if the skies opened up before it was time for her mother to come back. Suddenly, Jasmine stopped walking and stared blankly in the distance. I looked at her and I got worried. I thought something was happening to her. I thought she was becoming ill. She pointed at what she was seeing, though, and then I saw it too. Really, what we saw was very much like that famous video I alluded to earlier. There was a man. He looked extremely muscular, but he was covered in hair, and he was using his hands and feet to manually dig up a fresh grave. The idea of it was so sickening. It was really like something out of an old Hammer or Universal Frankenstein movie. "Is that a giant dog?" asked Jasmine. I was about to answer no, but a second glance at it made me wonder if she might be right. When I initially looked at it, I saw a big hairy man, but she was seeing a dog. When she asked me that question, then I could see it did indeed look as much like a dog as it did like a man. I hadn't noticed that it had ears on top of its head before she said that. I also hadn't made note of the face, which was long like a dog's face. Its actions made no sense to me. Why was it digging at the dirt with its hands? Why was it digging up a fresh grave? So recent that the groundskeepers hadn't had time to plant new grass on top of it. Who would do such a thing? Would even a wild dog do that? What was its goal? Surely the smell of formaldehyde would keep animals away, wouldn't it? I realized I had a lot of questions, but I lacked answers for any of them. Jasmine started rifling through her handbag, searching for her phone. She asked me to look at it through the zoom lens on my Android to see what it was because she wasn't finding her iPhone right away. My confidence returned a bit, and I realized that if I were to be Jasmine's protector as she wished, then it was my job to find answers to both of our questions. I told her to wait right there, and that I would walk closer and see what we were looking at. This alarmed her, and she grabbed me by the arm and loudly asked me not to leave her. The sound of our disagreement caught the highly sensitive ears of the figure we had been spying on, and it stopped what it was doing and looked over in our direction. I felt like all the blood in my body turned cold in 1 second, and my mouth went dry as well. I actually said something stupid to the creature like, "Good doggy," "Nice doggy," like that would make things better. And then the figure got up off all fours, and it stood tall on its hind legs, looking far, far larger than I had imagined it being when it was down digging up the grave with its hands and feet. That was neither a man nor a dog, and yet at the same time, it was sort of both. I saw its ears move backward and an angry, stressed expression take over its face. I saw its teeth seem to grow in size as it curled its black lips back further and further, and then I saw it begin walking toward us. It was not running. It was walking in the way a mean father walks toward the son he plans on spanking. That dog-like man seemed to be coming in our direction in order to teach us a lesson, and it was a lesson I don't think either of us was prepared to learn. We both screamed, and we both ran back toward the front gate. Thunder banged so loudly that it hurt your ears, and lightning flashed all around like strobe lights. We started to get rained on like 100 hoses were being fired off in our direction, and we were instantly soaked. I don't think either one of us could remember what we had planned to do if and when the rain started, and we were both in too much of a state of shock over what was happening in that moment. No matter how hard we ran, when I'd look behind us, that dogman seemed to be about the same distance. It wasn't in any sort of rush at all, and yet we were unable to put any greater distance between us and that horrible thing. We made it to the front gate, and I wondered where we could go to next. Nobody was around, and there were no structures to run inside of either. We could run down the road, or we could run into the animal sanctuary on the other side of the street. Neither seemed like a very good option. When we made it outside the cemetery, I looked behind us, and there was nobody behind us as far as I could see. That made me paranoid, because in the movies, when the bad guy isn't behind you anymore, it's because he's now in front of you. I looked around madly, unsure what we should be doing next. And that's when Jasmine's mom pulled up and asked us how we got soaking wet. I hadn't even realized it wasn't raining any longer. Even back in the cemetery, it appeared that the skies had lightened up a bit, and the sun was even beginning to poke through the cloud cover. Jasmine told her mom that we got caught in a freak summer thunderstorm, and that seemed to satisfy her. She turned off the AC inside the car and opened the windows so that hopefully we could dry off but not catch a cold. We drove off with her telling us boring stories about how her shopping went, what was in stock, what wasn't, and so on. We didn't bother even trying to tell her what we had just lived through. As we drove past Bab Run on our left, there was a strange animal with a long neck standing in tall weeds and watching us drive by. "Is that a stork?" asked Jasmine. I had thought it looked sort of like a long-necked lizard, but I agreed with her that it must be some kind of bird. Her mother said yes, they have rare and exotic animals in that place, then went back to talking about her new shoes. I didn't mind the banal chatter, in fact I welcomed it. I had had enough of the bizarre and the impossible for one day. In fact, I think I've had enough for a lifetime. And who can blame me, really? After all, I saw Dogman digging up a grave. Don't go anywhere, we've got another Cemetery Dogman story in a second. But first, here's my new rhyme. Our EP is named Bon Dinkley, the kind of name that makes you thinkly. No matter if we're off or on, we can always count on our EP Bon. Please join us in thanking today's executive producer Bon Dinkley for making this episode possible. In exchange, we share with him our secret uncensored Dogman stories that come out each Sunday night, as well as our over 21 hours of archived secret uncensored Dogman stories. And you can see them too. Just join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com, or else do what Bon Dinkley did and click that join button under this or any of our videos to become a channel member. Henry Lee Dogman will be along at the end of this show to fill in any details I may have left out. But now, let's jump into our second Dogman Cemetery story of the day, and we call this one Dogman Standing in the Tree Line. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I've got a Dogman story from way back before Dogman was even a thing. When we saw this creature, we just called it a monster. We didn't have the word Dogman yet. Actually, my friend Victor called him Poochie, but that's not a very scary name. He said it was from The Simpsons, but I guess I must have missed that episode. This is a true story that features a creepy cemetery, an old school version of Dungeons and Dragons, and, of course, the Dogman himself. I made a few Google searches while throwing this all together for you so that I wouldn't just be relying on my memory. It turns out that the word Dogman did actually exist when this happened, but it didn't exist yet for me and my friends. What I mean to say is we hadn't heard of him yet. The year was 1999. And my friends and I had a Dungeons and Dragons game that had been going on since 1996. We were geeks and proud of it, and we took our gaming very seriously. We had added 2 members over the years, and each time we did, we created a formal ceremony to bring them into the game. Not a ceremony in the game, but in reality. We would go to a pre-arranged location and perform the ceremony in our world, to welcome the new players into our imaginary adventure world. If you do a long-term campaign game, people will flake out on you if you don't force them to really invest in taking it seriously. We were about to welcome our first female player since my ex-girlfriend quit the game back in 1998, and we wanted to devise a truly memorable induction to sort of guilt her into showing up when we were playing. She was my friend Skeezix's new live-in girlfriend, so we wanted this to work out not just for our game, but also for Skeezix's home life. We decided to drive his girlfriend, her name was Nina, blindfolded, at dusk, to a creepy cemetery, and give her a ceremony based on the name of whichever name was on the creepiest looking tombstone when we got there. We could claim to be part of some history named after that tombstone, even though it wasn't going to be anyone that any of us had actually ever known. As long as we did it with a straight face, we hoped she'd be impressed and solidify into our newest regular player. The place we chose was the Dogman Cemetery on Yellow Creek Road here in Akron, Ohio. It's so small and it's set back in some trees that you could easily drive past it and never even notice that it was there. We were kind of hoping that Nina wasn't familiar with it so that we could weird her out a bit. As soon as we blindfolded her in the back seat of our friend Jose's car, Nina started to get fidgety. She knew this was just for fun, but it was freaking her out long before we even got into any of the scary stuff. To get to the tiny graveyard, we just drove along the Yellow Creek Road. As you might have guessed, that's the road that runs right along next to the Yellow Creek. On the way there, we quietly chanted, "Follow the Yellow Creek Road. Follow the Yellow Creek Road," under our breath to give Nina a clue as to where we were headed. She had made herself so nervous that she didn't even listen to what we were chanting. She just asked us to please stop doing it. There is no gate to the Dogman Cemetery. There's just a little hill or ramp where grass doesn't grow anymore because there's too much traffic up and down it. Jose pulled off the road to the right and parked. Then we led the still blindfolded Nina across the 2-lane road and up that dirt ramp. It was late dusk, almost fully nighttime, when we planted her directly in front of the tall obelisk-like gravestone and took off her blindfold. It didn't surprise anyone that she had a smart-mouth response as soon as she rubbed her eyes and looked around, but we were all very surprised at what she said, which was, "Who's wearing the monster costume?" I got scared she lost her mind. The question made no sense to me. Skeezix or someone asked her what was she talking about, and she pointed toward the woods just behind the tall tombstone and asked again, "Who's wearing the monster costume?" We all looked where she was pointing, and sure enough, there was a guy wearing a monster costume standing just inside the woodline over there. I mean, at least that was my first impression. Nina was counting heads, and she realized that everyone in the group was present and accounted for. That meant the monster had to be someone outside our group. That's when she got as confused and unnerved as the rest of us. The monster guy in question stepped out of the woods, making this sound like over and over. I saw that he was salivating from his mouth, and I realized that would be a difficult effect to pull off with a monster costume. You can't blame any of us for thinking it was somebody doing a hoax on us because it walked on 2 legs like a human being. But when it came out from behind the trees, you could really see how big it was. Like the tallest and most muscular basketball player of all time. It had these tall, pointed Batman ears on its head, and it had fur all over. The nose was on the end of a long snout, and the teeth it was making that nasty sound through looked like they could chomp your hand off in one bite. It really looked like a dog, except dogs don't walk on their hind legs like a guy or a woman does. But it wasn't a human. It wasn't even wearing any clothes or shoes. "We should get out of here," said Nina, and I was like, "But we haven't done the initiation ceremony yet," as I watched everyone back away out of the tiny graveyard. Even as we got in the car and drove off, that dog-headed monster man was still standing there, still glaring at us, still making sure we left, and didn't come back. I congratulated Nina for suggesting we leave, telling her that it was a true sign of leadership and proof that she would stay in our group until the end of time. Skeezix and Nina broke up 3 months later, and she moved to England, so we never saw her again. I drive past the Dogman Cemetery as often as I can come up with an excuse to. I drive past it in either direction, whichever way I'm going. I really hope to get to see that monster again. I never stop, and I never get out of the car, but I slow down when the traffic allows, and I take a look around inside. But, so far at least, I've never caught a second glance of the Dogman standing in the tree line. Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked what you saw, please consider clicking like on the video or sharing it with your friends and family that you think might also be interested. If you would like to see more of our work, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon next to the subscribe button so that YouTube will alert you when we put out a new video. To become a channel member and gain access to our special perks, you can click that join link under each of our videos. Another option is to join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. You can join for as little as 99 cents on YouTube or $1.50 at peterbernard.com, and that gains you access to our weekly secret uncensored episodes. If you'd like to see our 21 hours of archives of uncensored Dogman stories, then please join at the $3 level or above. To get to watch our shows in advance of the public, please join at our $10 level. That gets you all the perks. We're working on figuring out how to add the $10 level to the PayPal Club too. Hopefully that will happen sometime before August of 2021. If you join our channel memberships, you need to check our community page here on YouTube in order to get the links to the secret videos and other perks. If you're in the PayPal Subscribers Club, Peter will email you all the news and links himself. Once joining the PayPal Club, which is Peter's homemade club, please give him a chance to see that you've joined and to compose you a personal welcome email, as none of that is automated. But whichever you join, we'll name you an executive producer for the next available episode. Do you have a scary experience that you'd like to share with us? You can email us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or call our Scary Stories voicemail hotline at 804-LA-SCARY. That's 804-537-2279. It's a Google voicemail box, so that means it keeps cutting off after every 3 minutes. If your story is longer than that, please keep calling back and we can piece it together on our end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.